Have you ever been haunted? Not by words, but by the lack of them. No texts, no calls, no goodbye. It's just silence. And it's not the kind of silence that screams finality. She didn't block you. She didn't delete your photos. She's still there, visible, online, quiet. That's when your mind begins to spiral. Is she over me? Or is she waiting for me to make the first move? You scroll through her feed, looking for clues. You replay old conversations, searching for signs, but all you find is noise inside your own head. Modern many of you get lost in this silence. We've been taught to chase clarity, to seek answers, to fix things. When there's no message to decode, no closure to cling to, we start losing ourselves. And here's the paradox. In a world screaming for attention, her silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. This video isn't here to tell you she's coming back. It's not another false hope wrapped in motivational quotes. What it will do is help you understand what her silence really means. Because silence isn't always an ending. Sometimes it's a question, and more importantly, it's a mirror. A mirror reflecting not what she feels, but what you need to see about yourself. So if you found yourself sitting in that quiet, wondering what went wrong, this is your invitation to listen deeper. Not to her words, but to what her silence is asking you to become. Let's pause for a moment and talk about silence. Because for many men, silence feels like the scariest sound in the world. You reach for your phone, nothing. You check your message, still nothing. It's gone quiet, completely, until your mind fills in the blanks with panic. She's done with me. It's over. She doesn't care. But what if that silence doesn't mean rejection? What if it means something entirely different? You see, we often mistake silence for absence. In many cases, it's not that she's gone. It's that she's watching. Not in a creepy or manipulative way, but in a very human one. She's stepping back, not to disappear, but to observe. She wants to know, who are you when you're no longer being seen? What do you do when I'm no longer validating you? It's not a game. It's not always about punishment. It's a test of presence, and this is where so many men misstep. We rush in to fill the silence, texting, calling, explaining, pleading. We try to prove something, when what we really need is to pause and prove it to ourselves first. Her silence isn't empty, it's full. Full of questions, full of emotion, full of meaning. And more often than not, it's strategic, because silence creates space in that space. The truth is revealed. She may still care. She may still miss you, but her pride, her fear, her uncertainty, those things keep her quiet. And instead of saying how she feels, she waits. Waits to see if you'll come undone without her. Waits to see if you'll reach out from a place of fear or a place of grounded strength. Think about it this way. When someone really wants to cut you off, they don't just fall silent. They erase you. They block you. They remove every trace of you from their life. But if she's still visibly, she hasn't deleted you, hasn't blocked you, still lingers in your digital world. That's not an accident. It's not forgetfulness. It's a choice. It's a subtle signal, not an ending. It's a whisper, not a scream. So here's the shift in mindset. Instead of asking, why isn't she reaching out? Start asking, what is her silence trying to teach me? Because the truth is, it's not about her anymore. It's about you. Who do you become in the absence of attention? What kind of man are you when there's no one watching? That's the test. And the man who can stay centered, grounded, okay, and calm in the middle of silence. He doesn't just survive the distance, okay? He transforms in it. Let's talk about the kind of silence that doesn't feel like an ending, but a signal. You ever notice how she didn't block you? Didn't delete your pictures? Didn't unfollow or unfriend? She still watches your stories from time to time, still lingers in the digital shadows, and yet she says nothing. That's not an accident. That's not forgetfulness. That is calculated. Silence.c when someone truly wants nothing to do with you. They don't just go quiet, they vanish. They erase every trace, block, delete, disconnect. It's loud, final, and unmistakable. But when she leaves the door, just slightly ajar, she lets you see her watching from a distance. That's something else entirely. That's not closure. That's presence without permission. And it usually comes with signs, breadcrumbs, if you will. Maybe she posts a quote about heartbreak right after the day you would have celebrated something together. Maybe she shares a lyric from a song you once played during late night drives. Maybe it's a nostalgic photo or a caption that sounds strangely familiar. These aren't just posts. They're messages coded, indirect, but emotionally loaded. It's her way of saying, I'm still here, but without having to risk hearing something she doesn't want to hear. This kind of communication is quiet, but powerful. It's emotional proximity without the commitment of interaction. And she does it for one reason. She wants you to feel her presence without her having to say a word. Now, you might be wondering, why would someone do that? Why not just speak openly the truth? Vulnerability is terrifying. To reach out and say, I miss you, takes more courage than most people are ready to give, especially when they're unsure if that feeling is mutual. So instead, she chooses mystery over message. She leaves behind emotional fingerprints, small signs that she's still emotionally connected, okay? Even if she doesn't have the words to admit it. And here's the mistake most men make. They see these signs, and they chase them. They don't. They try to decode and respond to the subtext with panic or longing. But that's not how you win this game, if you want to call it that. What you do is this. You notice, but you don't chase. You observe, but you don't react emotionally. Because the moment you treat her breadcrumbs like a trail to follow, you give away your power. She didn't reach out directly for a reason. So don't respond as if she did. Instead, see it for what it is, a reflection of her own inner conflict. She's torn between wanting connection and fearing rejection. And you're being watched, not for what you'll say, but for what you'll become. So let your silence speak back with calm, with presence, with growth, not as revenge, not as strategy, but as self-respect. Because the man who doesn't flinch at emotional breadcrumbs is the man she remembers when the noise fades. Not for how fast he ran toward her, but for how deeply he stood his ground. Let's clear something up, because it matters more than you think. Not all silence means goodbye. Sometimes, silence is a locked door. Other times, it's a cracked one left, slightly open to see if you'll walk through it without thinking. And here's where most men trip. They treat every kind of silence the same. They panic, they chase, they explain. But the truth is theirs. A difference between real rejection and strategic silence. Let's start with the real thing. When a woman truly wants to end it, you won't have to guess. She'll block you, delete your pictures, remove you from every corner of her life. There won't be any breadcrumbs or signals. There'll be a clean, cut, cold, loud, and final. That's not silence. It's closure. It hurts, but at least it's honest. But if she didn't block you, if you still see her online, if she likes a post, watches your story, or posts a quote that sounds like it was ripped straight from your last conversation, that's not rejection, that's strategy. And it's not always conscious. It's not some manipulative plot. Sometimes it's just fear of being vulnerable, of saying too much, of not knowing what you'll do next. So instead of reaching out, she watches from a distance. Quietly, she wants to see, will you chase? Will you crack under pressure? Or will you remain calm, composed, unshaken? And this is the test. This is where your character is revealed, not through your words, but through your presence. Because if you mistake her strategic silence for real rejection, you'll react emotionally. Over message, you'll try to clear the air. You'll walk through that half-open door too quickly, proving that your peace depends on her attention And the moment she sees that, she knows she has control. But if you pause, if you observe, if you let that silence hang without flinching, okay? You flip the script. You show her that your identity isn't built on her validation. And that is powerful. Here's a simple analogy. Imagine a storm rolls in, and most people run for shelter. But one man stands still, not because he doesn't feel the rain, but because he's grounded in something deeper than fear. That man becomes unforgettable, not for chasing the storm, okay, for withstanding it. So the next time silence shows up, ask yourself, is she truly gone? Or is she testing the weight of my presence? Because reacting from fear is easy, and responding with strength, that's rare. And that's the difference between a boy and a man. Silence isn't just about hurts, about who you become in it. So if you've been left with silence, take a breath. Don't rush to fill the gap. Don't mistake strategy for rejection. Instead, hold your frame. Let her wonder. Let her watch. Because if it is a test, the man who stays still will always pass. Let's be honest, silence messes with us, not because it hurts louder than words, but because it forces us to confront the part of ourselves that hates uncertainty. When she goes quiet, when there's no explanation, no closure, no clear ending, you don't just lose the connection, you lose your center. And that's exactly where the real test begins. Because whether she knows it or not, her silence is no longer just a pause. It's a mirror, a psychological test, not of your love, not of your memory, but of your self-control. Think about it. She hasn't said, we're done. She hasn't given you a clean break or an official goodbye. No, she simply stepped back and left the emotional air hanging. And what she's doing intentionally, or not, is watching what you'll do when you feel ignored. Do you spiral? Do you send that desperate late-night paragraph? Do you start explaining things she didn't ask about? Or do you hold your frame? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If you react out of panic, you try to fix what hasn't even been defined as broken. You're showing her that your peace depends on her presence, and that's not love. Instability. The strongest men don't flinch when the door is half closed. They don't chase after shadows, trying to force closure. They don't knock loudly, demanding answers. They wait, they watch, and they remain. Why? Because emotional control isn't about being numb, it's about being centered. A storm may be swirling around you, but you choose not to let it inside. And that kind of stillness, that kind of poise in the face of uncertainty, it sends a signal louder than any emotional outburst ever could. It says, I'm not here to perform for attention. I'm here because I'm whole with or without it. Now, here's a question. For you, have you ever passed that test? Have you ever sat in silence and resisted the urge to break it just to feel in control again? Most men haven't. Most of us were never taught how. We were taught that real love chases, that real men fix, that silence means danger. But sometimes, silence is a space where your character takes shape. It's in that space that you realize you don't need to explain yourself to be seen. You don't need to beg to be valued. You just need to be still long enough to see what survives without being forced. So the next time you find yourself facing the quiet, don't see it as a trap. See it as training, because the man who can hold his center while everything around him goes uncertain, that man doesn't lose, even if she never comes back. Even if the door eventually closes, he walks away with something more valuable than closure. Self-respect. And that's a victory no silence can take away. Let's be real for a second. When she goes silent, your first thought might be, she's playing games. She wants me to chase. She's trying to mess with my head. But what if I told you it's not a game? Hey, what if her silence isn't about manipulation, but protection? You see, for many women, going quiet isn't a strategy to hurt you. It's a shield. A way to guard themselves from something even more painful than being alone: rejection. Most women want connection, okay? They long for closeness, clarity, and emotional safety, just like we do. But they've also learned, often the hard way, that vulnerability doesn't always pay off. So instead of saying, "I miss you," they post a quote about heartbreak instead of texting, "I'm not over you." They upload a photo from that trip you took together last summer instead of admitting, "I still think about you." They share a song lyric that speaks volumes without saying a word. These aren't just random posts. They're emotional signals, subtle, indirect, and carefully placed like echoes in an empty room, hoping someone will hear without the sender being fully exposed. And it makes sense, right? Because to reach out directly is to risk the worst answer imaginable, silence in return. So she holds back, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much to be left hanging. Now, here's where most men misinterpret it. We see those breadcrumbs, those quotes, those memories, those songs, and we either rush in with emotion or dismiss them entirely, thinking she's just trying to get attention. But the truth is far more human, far more fragile. She's in a kind of limbo, torn between the desire to reconnect and the fear of being rejected. That internal tug-of-war is exhausting, and silence becomes the safest place to stand. Not too close, not too far, just in between. So, what should you do with this knowledge? First, don't try to decode every lyric or overanalyze every photo. Don't let yourself get caught in a cycle of guessing games. Instead, just understand. Understand that behind her silence might be a woman still emotionally connected to you, but not yet emotionally safe enough to reach out. And that's okay, because your job isn't to fix her silence. Your job is to respect it and to stay grounded in who you are while she figures herself out. You see, emotional intelligence isn't about reacting to every little signal. It's about recognizing the emotional climate and choosing your response wisely. So when you see those subtle posts, those nostalgic hints, those shadowed signs, don't chase, don't mock, don't ignore, just notice, stay still, because the man who can read the signs without needing to act on them is the man who becomes unforgettable, not because he reached out, but because he didn't have to. There's a moment, every man faces a moment where everything inside you wants to reach out, to explain, to fix, say something that might pull her back. But what if I told you, doing nothing is often the most powerful response? Let's talk about what it means to respond like a Stoic. Because a Stoic man doesn't beg. He doesn't send long emotional texts at 1 a.m. He doesn't try to force clarity from someone who's chosen silence. He doesn't react. He reflects, and that reflection, that pause, that stillness isn't weakness, strength in its purest form. You see, in a world where we're told to fight for love, prove our worth, and never let her go without a fight, Stoic does the opposite. Not because he's cold, not because he doesn't care, but because he understands this truth. Your reaction reveals your training. When she pulls away, when the texts stop, when the silence stretches on, your first impulse is to fill the gap. But that impulse, that's your ego talking. It's fear, dressed up as love. A Stoic man doesn't move from fear. He doesn't need attention to feel valuable. His worth isn't determined by her responses, it's determined by who he knows he is. Let me give you something to think about. If a king had to explain his worth to every passerby, he'd no longer be a king. He'd be a beggar wearing a crown. And yet, that's what so many men do in silence. They abandon their throne. They chase, they explain, they perform, but not the Stoic. The Stoic remains calm, clear, centered, not because it's easy, but because it's who he's become. He understands that sometimes the best move is no move at all, that the silence isn't something to salvage, something to observe. And through that observation, he learns two things: who she really is when emotions cool down, who he really is when the world no longer applauds. Because here's the truth, that most men never hear. You don't earn respect by chasing. You earn it by being unmoved. The world is noisy. Women are emotional. Breakups are messy. But your peace, that's yours to keep. And when you protect it, when you guard it like something sacred, people feel it. Even the woman who left. Because silence, held with strength, speaks louder than any apology, any text, any late-night confession. So the next time you're tempted to break your silence to prove something, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I'm grounded or because I'm afraid? And if the answer is fear, step back, because the man who can sit in the fire of uncertainty without flinching, that man doesn't just survive heartbreak. He becomes the kind of man no one forgets, not because he shouted, but because he stood still, let the silence speak for him. Have you ever noticed how some things she does just don't make sense? She hasn't reached out, she hasn't said a word, and yet there she is, watching your stories, liking an old photo from months ago, sharing a quote that sounds a little too familiar. You think, is this a coincidence? Let me save you the time. No, it's not. These are emotional signals, quiet ones, indirect, but real. You see, when a woman is truly done, she disappears completely. She unfollows, she blocks, she moves on with intention. No breadcrumbs, no presence, just a distance. But when she's still emotionally tethered to you, something shifts. She doesn't reappear with a grand gesture or a midnight phone call. Instead, she leaves behind little traces of presence, quote about missing someone, a song lyric loaded with meaning, a reaction to something you posted weeks ago. These aren't mistakes. They're echoes. Echoes of emotion she's not ready to speak out loud. And here's the thing, most men don't realize. She doesn't want to be obvious. She wants you to feel her there without her having to step out and risk being hurt. Because silence, for her, feels safer than vulnerability. 2. Send a message is to open a door. And when she's not sure what you'll do with that door, she stands just outside it, waiting, hoping you'll sense her. She's not ready to reconnect, but she's not ready to let go either. This is what I call the in-between. It's not reconciliation. It's not rejection. It's emotional limbo, and it's where most men lose their power. Why? Because we try to define it. We text, we question, we chase closure. But what if I told you, you're not supposed to fix that space. You're supposed to respect it. The signs she's still emotionally connected aren't invitations to act. They're windows into her emotional state, not her readiness to talk. And that distinction is everything. You might be tempted to send a message, something simple like, hey, saw your post. But that's not the move. The move, stillness. Because when you acknowledge her presence without needing to respond to it, she shows something rare, emotional discipline. And in doing so, you let her know without saying a word that you've grown, that you're not waiting, that you're not bitter, but that you've learned how to exist in the space between what was and what might be without falling apart. Let me leave you with this. If she's still watching, still posting, still lingering in your digital orbit, it means she still feels something. But feelings alone don't mean action. So don't confuse emotional presence with emotional readiness. Respect the signs, acknowledge the connection, but stay grounded in your center, because the man who doesn't flinch in the in-between, he becomes unforgettable. Not because he ran after her, but because he stood still. She felt it. Let me ask you something. What's the first thing you feel when someone you care about goes silent? Panic, confusion, that gut deep urge to reach out and say, hey, what happened? Talk to me. Not alone. Most men are wired to fix things. You see a problem or even just a space where something might be wrong, and we rush to fill it. But here's the truth. Most of us never learned. Not everything broken needs fixing, and not everything silent needs sound. In fact, silence is the exact thing we need to sit with. Because when she goes quiet, when the messages stop, and the calls don't come, our first instinct is to seek clarity. We want closure. We want resolution. We want something that makes the discomfort go away. So we text, we explain, we demand answers, but in doing so, we don't get stronger, get smaller. We hand our power to the very thing that's testing it. What if this time you did something different? What if, instead of trying to fill the silence, you listened to it? Because silence, when you really let it echo, doesn't just reveal her emotional distance, it reveals your emotional depth. It asks you questions that words never could. Can you sit with uncertainty without losing yourself? Can you resist the urge to fix what may not even be broken? Can you learn how to hold space for both her confusion and your own? You don't need a reaction from her to know where you stand. And you certainly don't need to chase a conversation just to feel seen. What you do need is stillness, to observe, to reflect, to grow. Because the silence she gives you, it might be more about you than it is about her. It teaches you where your triggers are. It exposes your insecurities. It shows you whether you're anchored or adrift. And if you're paying attention, it will shape you into a version of yourself that doesn't need constant validation to stay grounded. Here's a powerful truth. You don't gain control by demanding answers. You gain control by mastering your response. The man who can sit in the quiet, who can feel every ounce of discomfort and still not chase, that man is dangerous in the best way possible, because he's not ruled by impulse. He's not trapped in a need to be reassured. He's learned how to turn silence into strength. So the next time she pulls back, but don't fill the space with noise. Fill it with presence. Take care of your mind. Get back in your body. Reconnect with what matters to you, not just what you're afraid of losing. Because what she does in that silence is hers. But what you do with it, that's where your transformation begins. Silence. It's not just the absence of her voice. It's the presence of a deeper question. Who are you when no one is clapping? Who are you when she's not texting back? When the compliments stop? When the attention fades? Because that's the moment most men fall apart. Not because they lost her, but because they realize we were never really with themselves to begin with. See, silence strips away the noise. It exposes the truth, not just about her feelings, but about your foundation. Are you a man who only feels valuable when he's being seen? Or are you the kind of man who's already whole, with or without the applause? That answer determines everything that happens next. The man who thrives in silence doesn't chase closure. He doesn't beg to be heard. He doesn't need someone else to validate what he already knows inside. He becomes unforgettable, not because he played the game better, not because he manipulated the outcome, but because he stood still. He stayed calm. He stayed rooted. And if she comes back, she comes back because she feels that energy. Not desperation, not performance, but calm, grounded presence. And if she doesn't, you still win, because you didn't use the silence to wait. You used it to grow. You took the time to level up your mindset. You trained your emotional discipline. You learned how to show up for yourself in ways no one else ever could. That version of you, no one can take that away. Not anyone. So here's the truth you need to take with you. The next chapter of your life isn't waiting for her move. It's waiting for yours. What happens next shouldn't depend on whether she texts, watches your story, or reaches out. It should depend on the vision you have for yourself, the man you're becoming. So stop asking, will she come back? Start asking, what kind of man do I want to be now that she's gone? Because once you answer that, won't you live into that? She'll feel it, Tevin, if she never says it out loud. She'll feel the shift. She'll sense the strength, and she'll know she didn't leave a boy. She left a man. And that kind of man, he doesn't wait. He builds, he grows, he walks forward quietly, confidently, without looking back, because he's not trying to be remembered. He's too busy becoming the kind of man who can't be forgotten.